Are Neanderthals and Homo sapiens the same species? Scientists have been volleying the question back and forth for more than a century now. And here we have an image of Neanderthal skeletons and looking differently, notably from those of modern humans, and yet genetic evidence shows that the two interbred, indicating they could be members of the same species. Neanderthals, which disappeared from the archaeological record roughly 40,000 years ago, have long been considered our closest evolutionary relatives, but almost since the first discovery of Neanderthals remains in the 1800s, scientists have been arguing over whether Neanderthals constitute their own species or if they're simply a subset of our own species, Homo sapiens, that has since gone extinct. So what does the science say? In particular, what does the genetic evidence, which did not exist back when many early hominins were first discovered, show? The question of whether Neanderthals can be considered the same species as modern humans is complicated by our understanding of what a species is. Jeff Schwartz, a physical anthropologist and professor emeritus at the University of Pittsburgh, told Life Science, the most common definition, called the biological species concept, describes a species as a group of individuals that can interbreed in nature and produce viable offspring, but even today, several odd hybrids poke holes in this definition. Horses and donkeys can breed, but the mules they give birth to are sterile, and the two are considered to be different species, Schwartz said. But other combinations do produce viable offspring. These include the liger, that is a cross between the lion and a tiger, and the beefalo, a cross between the cow and an American bison. For a long time, scientists did not know whether Neanderthals and modern humans interbred, so this definition was not particularly enlightening. Instead, early assessments were made based on Neanderthal anatomy, which is different enough from Homo sapiens that specialists can often distinguish bones from the two groups. Neanderthals had a longer lower skull with a bonier forehead and a less pronounced chin than Homo sapiens, for example, and their bodies were stockier. And because of this, in 1864, Neanderthals were first classified as their own species, H. neanderthalensis, but as more early human relatives were discovered, such as Homo erectus in 1891, Homo heidelbergensis in 1907, and Homo habilis in 1960, their relationships to one another became increasingly complex. Compared with other species, Neanderthals seem much more human, Schwartz said. Recent research has suggested that both groups had similar auditory and vocal abilities, and controversial finds hint that Neanderthals may have buried their dead and made jewelry and art. In 1962, a group of anthropologists, geneticists, and behaviorists met in Austria to draft a vote on an evolutionary history of human relatives based on the species that had been discovered at the time. Their results, a manuscript called Classification and Human Evolution, placed Neanderthals under Homo sapiens as a subspecies. And when I was in college, that was what I thought, Schwartz said. It was only later in the 70s and 80s that Neanderthals were reclassified as their own species based on new analysis, and that remains the most common designation seen today. But in 2010, discovery shook things up again. An international team of dozens of researchers published their first draft of the Neanderthal genome based on 3 individuals and compared it with that of modern humans. The authors found hints of the Neanderthal signature in the human genomes, suggesting that Neanderthals mixed with modern human ancestors at least 120,000 years ago. Dozens of papers have since confirmed this and found that interbreeding occurred at multiple points in time. The implication is clear. Neanderthals and humans were interbreeding. Joan Bertrand-Petit, an evolutionary biologist at Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona, Spain, said, adding that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens also interbred with another group of early hominids, the Denisovans. It's possible then that all three could represent different versions of the same species, he said. Bertrand Petit pointed to modern humans as an example. People around the world have noticeable differences in stature or skin, hair, and eye color, but we are remarkably similar from a genetic standpoint. The amount of genetic variation between any two individuals is only about 0.1%, meaning that only one base pair out of every 1,000 will be different. In comparison, the 2010 paper showed that Neanderthal genome was 99.7% identical to that of 5 present-day humans. To have big differences in morphology does not mean you need to have big differences in genetics. It just means you need some differences in specific genes, Bertrand Petit said. So this idea that they were different species does not make any sense to me as a geneticist, he said. Schwartz does not think the genetic evidence has necessarily settled the debate, but he has no misgivings about the rigor of the work the other groups have done. Moving forward, he advocates for an interdisciplinary approach that does not position genetics as the final say. He said, we need a holistic approach and we cannot keep pitting one discipline against the other. We have to get together and figure it out, he said. And this is by Amanda Haight on Life Science. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.